Hey, greetings there, everyone. It's GleeCon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On our last episode, we continued our World of Warcraft Classic playthrough by looking at the Cold Ridge Valley dwarf/gnome starting zone. We played as a dwarven hunter named Nessingwary. Score on getting that name. We've also been reading the Dungeons & Dragons on our side lore. We are doing Dungeons & Dragons World of Warcraft campaign setting, and we're in the book called Lands of Mystery, which is supposedly written by Bran Bronzebeard. It's his voice, and we're continuing. We've almost explored all of Kalimdor. We're in the last couple of zones of southern Kalimdor, so stay a while and listen as we talk about the Thousand Needles. If you look, here's a quest. The adventures normally have some kind of adventures, but they accidentally stuck it underneath this. It's a strange elixir. This should have been an adventure that we did at the end of the last episode for Tanaris. It says a goblin in Gadgetstan, Marin Noggenfogger, asked the heroes to bring back a water-laden dew gland from one of the plant elementals in Thistle Shrub Valley. In exchange, he'll give them all samples of his new concoction, Noggenfogger elixir. See more Magic and Mayhem for details. That we actually already read that one. That was the last book we went through. The heroes must then contend with a trip across the desert, duel ogres guarding their territories, and finally defeat an elemental to recover the gland. Okay, that's the most hand-holding I think we've had in one of these adventures and telling them what to do. Most of the time they're just vague suggestions. All right, Thousand Needles is a tribal area ran by Rao Cliffrunner, who is part of Tauren of Freewind Post, and Arnak Grim Totem, Grenka Blood Screech. So we have regular Tauren, the Grim Totem Tauren, and some Harpies. This is a horde zone set up for sure. It's now more of a contested zone, but back then it was straight up horde. After I made my way east from Camp Mojache in Faralis, I came to the border of Thousand Needles. The mountains to either side narrowed, and then like a line drawn on a map, the sands of the desert appeared ahead. The forest of Faralis died abruptly at this line. So many places I've been in this world, and never have I seen a change of climate and terrain come so quickly. There has to be magic at work on that border, but if so, I found no sign of it. I met a few night elves at a camp there on the green side of the border. They were guarding, of all things, a moon well. Maybe that well is what held the desert back. If so, the elves didn't say. They did warn me, however, that the centaur and harpies of Thousand Needles were not to be trifled with. They pointed out a path, barely visible in the desert sands, that I should stick to, or so they claimed. I pretended to listen as I set off, but as soon as I made it around the first mesa, I was off to explore this strange place. Thousand Needles sits in a deep valley, and sticking up everywhere are towering spires, balancing rocks, and sheer-walled mesas. These are the Needles the name of the place refers to, and damned if there weren't at least 1,000 of them. I don't know for sure. I lost count when I came to the first Galak village. The centaur weren't hostile to me, at least not at first. They came over and chatted in low common. I explained that I was an explorer just trying to learn about the land, but when I asked about their village, their demeanor changed. They told me to leave, and their spears suggested I obey. I didn't see the need to slaughter a dozen centaur at that particular moment, so I just smiled and waved and moved off. In time, I arrived at Freewind Post, a simple village located atop a mesa near the center of Thousand Needles. From here, I could look out upon the whole area with the exception of the Shimmering Flats. I also learned that from here I could travel through the Shimmering Flats on my way to Tanaris, the next stop on my journey. People and culture. Thousand Needles is really two regions in one. The white sand desert called the Shimmering Flats has its own moniker. For the rest of this discussion, when I refer to Thousand Needles, I'm talking about the main area, not including the Shimmering Flats, which I'll discuss separately. Tauren dominate Thousand Needles. They are split into two camps, the friendly Cliff Runners in Freewind Post and the more aggressive Grim Totems in Dark Cloud Pinnacle. Both are tribal cultures with a strong dedication to bloodlines, as evidenced by the fact that their clans take their names from their leaders. Interestingly, both Tauren clans dwell atop mesas, making their way to ground level only to hunt for food or raid the other faction. While the Grim Totems use ladders and ropes, the Cliff Runners use a smaller version of the Great Lift, see below, allowing them greater mobility. However, the Grim Totems have a bridge to the Barrens, while their rivals do not. In constant warfare with both Tauren tribes are the Galak Centaur, who dwell in two separate villages, Splithoof Crag and Camp Aetholk. In my initial foray into Thousand Needles, I came to Ethok, where I was rebuffed. At Split Hoof, I probably would have been attacked on sight. Both companies of Centaur are inherently distrustful of outsiders, but the Split Hoof residents are downright mean. I didn't get a chance to learn much of their culture, but it seemed typically Centaur. The Centaur of both villages use brightly colored paint, slathered in symbols on their bodies to identify themselves. Presumably this has some sort of rank designation or other form of importance. That's all interesting considering how much you're buddied up with the Centaur now in the Dragon Isles. Geography. Thousand Needles is a desert, plain and simple. The ground isn't sand, however, but smooth rock, as though water once flowed through here, carving out the canyon. Perhaps a river once flowed from Fairless through here to the lake that was once the Shimmering Flats. Speaking of water, bring lots of it. That's my recommendation if you're going to come here. In Thousand Needles, it's not so big a deal. There are water holes here and there, just watch out for the buzzards, hyenas, and kobolds, as well as a couple of geysers, and even a natural spring or two. Shimmering Flats is another story. There's no water anywhere at all, and the winds kick up salt dust that gets caked on your lips and face. A few accidental licks of that and you'll be thirstier than you thought possible. My recommendation, make some kind of mask or wrap your face like those nomads in Tanaris. This canyon that makes up most of Thousand Needles is long and narrow, with the entrance to Fairless on the extreme west side. In the northwest is the great lift to the southern barrens. In the southwest, wyverns dwell, and hunters of all races steal eggs for use by wyvern masters across Azeroth. Eastward, beyond Freewind Post, the lands become rougher, and travelers find themselves menaced by harpies, rogue elementals, and kobolds. Then at the southeast edge, the rocks end and the white sands begin. The Great Lift. A well-worn road leads to the cliff walls that border Thousand Needles. At the end of this road is the Great Lift. You have to see this thing to believe it. It's got to be the largest rope and pulley device I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot of inventions in my travels. 10 Taurens standing together and heaving at once, as one hoist a massive wooden platform all the way up the sheer cliff wall. I watched them do this, and they could move 2 of their number at once to the top, several hundred feet above, and this thing was invented by Tauren. Not goblins or gnomes, but Tauren. I repeat, they could prove able engineers if given the chance. I suppose I was in a bit of awe when I spoke to them about their incredible creation, and that endeared me to them. The centaurs seemed to try often to destroy the Great Lift, and it was only just now repaired. They let me ride it to the top, where I looked out upon the southern barrens. That human spy, Thuron, never mentioned this place, or I could have come this way and skipped the expensive griffin ride to Nigel's Point. Ah, well, I suppose I shouldn't have given him quite so many free drinks that night. Also interesting is that the Tauren consider this a neutral site. The cliff runners and grim totems don't attack each other when they're using the Great Lift. However, this pact doesn't stop Centaur. High Perch. Located in the southwestern edge of Thousand Needles, this section of cliff face is riddled with caves and open areas. Wyverns nest here by the hundreds, and the area is a popular hunting ground for egg poachers. Centaur consider the wyverns sacred, and woe to anyone they catch stealing eggs. When I passed this way, I saw more than a few rotting skeletons tied to posts near the path to High Perch, a clear warning if ever I've seen one. The Shimmering Flats. The Shimmering Flats may well be the most inhospitable place on Azeroth. I make that claim before traveling to Northrend, mind. The sands are endless, with only the occasional rock, hardy cactus, or burnt machine part breaking the monotony. The sand is caked with salt, evidence that this entire area was once a salty lake bed. Well, that and the fact that every now and then you come across an ancient shipwreck where none has any right to be. Dried bones of giant sea creatures indicate that once, perhaps before the Sundering, this lake provided access to the ocean. Even in this baking wasteland, though, life exists. I spotted giant scorpions, basilisks, vultures, and even an air elemental as I made my way across this desolate plain. Sites and settlements. Sites and settlements here are few and far between. After all, both Thousand Needles and the Shimmering Flats are deserts. Who wants to live in a desert? Well, Tauren and Centaur, obviously, and gnomes and goblins and harpies. Well, okay, lots of people like the desert, I guess. I suppose if you hate the rain, it's the place to be. Camp Athok and Splithoof Crag are villages. Athok slightly smaller. These villages are the main Centaur settlements in Thousand Needles. Splithoof is north of Freewind Post, almost within sight of Dark Cloud Pinnacle, while Athok is to the west, close to the Fairless border. Both villages are part of the Galak tribe, although each has its own leader. They are part of the same family and are closely allied. The Splithoofs have an uneasy truce with the Grim Totem Tauren, although this piece seemed tenuous at best. Dark Cloud Pinnacle is also a village, a lot smaller than those Centaur ones. East of the Great Lift, the Grim Totem Torum make their home atop 3 small mesas connected by rope bridges. There are 2 access ways to this place, a natural slope up a 4th mesa, followed by a trip across a bridge, or another bridge from the Barrens. Both are well guarded, and the Grim Totems don't like visitors. They also wield potent shaman magic, as I found out when I tried to hail them from halfway up the southern ramp. Climbing upward while being blasted by spells is like swimming up a waterfall, so I turned around and left. Freewind Post. This is a much bigger village. If you travel from the Feralus border to the Shimmering Flats, you come to Freewind Post about halfway through your journey. If you don't look up, though, you might miss it. It's located atop a huge mesa, accessible only via a Tauren-pulled lift, like the one to the Barrens or the one leading to Thunder Bluff. I have no idea how the Cliff Runners got up there in the first place, but there they are. Dozens of huts and teepees stand up there, and the best thing is they don't need a lot of guards. Who's going to mount an attack that far up? And the Mirage Raceway. It's considered a village because of its size. The Shimmering Flats is home to a small collection of buildings and forges operated by rival gnomes and goblins. There, they operate a racetrack carved out of the salt sands, pitting their machines against each other in regular contests to prove which race is technologically superior. Naturally, this leaves the sands littered with debris from countless mechanical failures, but since no other intelligent beings live in this wasteland, there isn't anybody around to care. The Mirage Raceway is a bustling settlement divided down the middle by a racetrack carved in the salt-caked lake bed. On one side, the goblins labor in their forges, while on the other, gnomes tinker in workshops day in and day out. The goal of both sides seems to be to develop the fastest and most dangerous mechanical vehicle on Azeroth. The frequency with which they blow themselves up is as astonishing as the racing vehicles they construct. See Appendix 16 for a few of my sketches of these machines. Rogue Feather Den is a village-sized harpy area. Most of the harpies I meet are cruel, bloodthirsty monsters who attack on sight. These at least gave me a second look and screeched among themselves a few times before coming at me. A couple of them carried weapons in their clawed hands, and most wore primitive belts and jewelry, too. I suspect they're smarter than your average harpy, but that's still not saying much. After I killed a half dozen of them, they left me alone. This is a place you want to avoid. History. Well, I'm no geologist, but I believe Thousand Needles is a recent creation. There was probably a river here once, and Shimmering Flats was a saltwater lake that reached the ocean somewhere, probably via Tanaris. Too bad I can't go back in time. Or maybe I can, thanks to the Caverns of Time. At some point after the Sundering Tauren moved in and occupied the area, they thought it was sacred at the time, something about communing with spirits or some other nature-worshipping business. Regardless, they stayed. Then the Centaur showed up, and it's been war ever since. And after the Cataclysm, yes, this becomes a river and lake again. Neither side has the slightest bit interested in the Shimmering Flats, so when the goblins and gnomes showed up a while ago, no one cared. I think a vast barren wasteland is just about the best place in the world for a bunch of crazies trying to blow each other up. And I do remember, that's one thing I actually missed. There's a fun little quest line there now, but in Classic, it was fun to have the little racetrack quest line out there. From Centaur to Tauren to Raceways, Thousand Needles has ample opportunity for adventure. Good egg. A wyvern trainer and gadget stand is looking for a new mount, but he needs a special type that only comes from the perfect sort of egg. A gnomish machine, the Eggomatic, can analyze eggs to determine if they are the right kind. The heroes must carry the machine to High Perch, examine eggs they find there, and locate one perfectly suited for the trainer's needs. Then on the way back, they must explain to the Centaur just what they're doing with one of the sacred wyvern eggs in their possession. Okay. All right, so we are just about done. We have Ungoro Crater left that we'll cover on the next one of these. But hey, we got another episode in the pipe, 5x5, and my appreciation for your viewership knows no bounds. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time on Lore of Warcraft.